continue. Raywat Deonandan from the University of Ottawa, epidemiologist, joins us now. Raywat, can you hear the horns from your perch?
Occasionally I can. I live downtown. Some hours of the evening we do hear in the distance. If you take any walk 20 minutes from where I am, you'll hear them. It's not fun.
There's the frustration that many people have echoed across this country. There's going to be a protest here at the Manitoba Legislature tomorrow. Police telling Winnipeggers that you may want to make alternative arrangements if you work or live downtown. They're tapping into a mood. I'm not sure it's growing or not, but with Omicron, a lot of people have gotten it, and people are just done. They're fed up with this. I know you understand this, but the epidemiologist in you also says we got to stick with the program.
What I want to know is, what's their solution? Open everything up? Well, everything is opening up. So I guess what is there left to be opened up except remove all restrictions on capacity limits and remove all vaccine mandates and remove all masking mandates, which are the lowest hanging fruit for controlling this pandemic. But frankly, the economic restrictions are almost entirely gone. So the rationale for these protests, if you look at it rationally, are paper thin.
If we did that, Raywat, if we removed all those mandates, all the vaccine mandates, all the masking mandates.
Which will happen someday.
But if we did that now, what do you reckon would happen?
We'd have an accelerated rate of growth of cases. And the case growth is extremely high right now. And one might argue, then, what's the big deal? The big deal is the hospital capacity is stretched thin. And this doesn't make the news enough. If you go to the ER, as friends and relatives of mine have been in recent weeks, it doesn't look busy because it's controlled chaos behind the scenes. But you go in at 6 p.m. and you leave at 6 a.m. never having seen a doctor. That's how bad it is. So that's the reality that's not being fully communicated to people who perhaps have not had to encounter the healthcare system yet until they're in a car accident or break a leg or something. So wearing a mask is such a small thing to ask of people. Getting a vaccine, such a small thing to ask of people. In exchange, you get an open society mostly. You get a thriving economy. You get goods and services passing freely through your community. It's frustrating.
Comments today out of Ontario, one of their top doctors talking about the natural immunity from Omicron. Are there still questions swirling about that? Because some may say, well, listen, Raywat, I never got vaccinated. I got Omicron, so therefore I have natural immunity. But the question remains, is it very good and does it last very long?
It's a huge question and some things to consider. First of all, there's some studies suggesting that some people who get infected historically, 30% of them never develop antibodies. Some studies suggest that. There's a strong suggestion from an immunologist that Omicron, being an upper respiratory virus, may not offer any kind of immunity at all. We just don't know yet. We do know that the vaccines offer superb protection against serious disease. Superb. Natural immunity, we don't know, and the reinfection rate for natural immunity might be high as well. It's not something I would want to gamble on when we have this other solution, which is literally 2 minutes of something stuck in your arm with extremely low risk associated with it, whereas infection carries with it a high risk of bad outcomes.
Have we gotten better at drilling down on what the issue for some people is? And I'm not talking about those who are anti-vax, and it doesn't matter what you say to them, you will never change their mind. I'm talking about that small group that are hesitant and truly hesitant because they're just not sure they trust the science. Do we know how best to address their concerns? Because it is a small thing for you who understands the science and for your family, but for others it's not quite so small.
It's getting harder to address it because as time goes on, they are assaulted by more and more disinformation. You have some news agencies reporting numerator data, for example. So in some hospitals, the number of vaccinated people outnumber the unvaccinated. And that's astonishing to some people, but epidemiologically that's expected because of the rate of hospitalization for the unvaccinated is extremely higher than for the vaccinated. So that simple difference between rates and numerators is confusing to people who aren't used to dealing in mathematics. So to my mind, the biggest barrier here is simple numeracy. And that's a tough barrier to crack if we've been ignoring public education for a generation or more around numeracy and science. So underlying all this, though, is a distrust of authority in general. If you don't trust government, you don't trust scientists, you don't trust the supposed elites, then what are you going to do? You're going to trust your neighbor and your friends. And if they're getting their information from questionable sources, well, then we're lost. So we have to start now re-educating the public about how to find and parse information. It's going to take years to recoup our losses.
And I always find, though, that they're the loudest voices. They're not the majority of the voices out there. The rest of us are listening and paying attention to the majority of what is going on. Ontario's chief medical officer saying that there are 29 cases of BA2, subvariant of Omicron. What do we know? What don't we know about that?
We don't know if it's more transmissible to the point where it's going to displace Omicron Prime. It probably will. It does look like it's not more lethal. It's not more problematic. It's not more serious. That's the most recent data I've seen. I could be wrong about that. So that's good news. So it won't make more people sick. Or rather, it won't make infected people sicker. It might make more people sick because it may infect more people faster. So, we're already, though, in the thick of it with Omicron. I don't think it's going to create that much more chaos, except do so faster.
Raywat, hang in there, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Raywat Deonandan from the University of Ottawa.